The dollar ruled the world for nearly 80 years. But now, oil is being sold in yuan. Russia and China are bypassing the dollar entirely. Gold reserves are surging. BRICS Plus is expanding rapidly, and behind closed doors, new financial systems are quietly being built. Some say this is simply financial evolution. Others believe this is the beginning of the end for American financial dominance. Tonight, 5 retired spies give their brutally honest opinions. No spin, no diplomacy, just experience. Let's begin. Back with us tonight, Texas Buck McCoy, Colonel Dmitry the Bear Volkov, Madam Li Wei, Sir Reginald Hawthorne, Lucas the Vault Bruner. 5 retired spies, 5 very different worldviews. First round, what exactly is happening right now?
China views this shift as part of a broader transition toward a more balanced global financial structure. Many nations increasingly prefer settling trade in local currencies to reduce external risks and political dependency. Yuan settlements in energy, infrastructure, and manufacturing agreements are expanding steadily. This is not necessarily about replacing the dollar overnight. It is about creating alternatives. Developing nations want flexibility, sovereignty, and protection from financial pressure. A multipolar economic system is emerging naturally from changing global realities.
What's happening is that de-dollarization is no longer just political talk. It's gaining actual momentum. China and Russia are settling huge portions of trade outside the dollar. BRICS nations are building alternative payment systems. Oil deals are increasingly bypassing U.S. currency channels. That's a direct challenge to American financial power. The problem is, Washington underestimated how much resentment had built up over sanctions and financial pressure. The dollar still dominates global trade, no question. But for the first time in decades, serious cracks are starting to show.
America taught the world a dangerous lesson. If Washington controls the financial system, then Washington can punish anyone it dislikes. Russia learned this directly. China learned this carefully. Many other countries learned this quietly. That is why alternative systems are now expanding. Russia and China now conduct most bilateral trade outside the dollar entirely. The West created this movement itself. Once trust disappears, fragmentation becomes inevitable.
The reality, as usual, sits somewhere between dramatic headlines and uncomfortable truth. Yes, de-dollarization is absolutely happening. Slowly, quietly, relentlessly. But people predicting the immediate collapse of the dollar are being theatrical. The dollar still dominates reserves, liquidity, and global finance. Replacing that infrastructure is extraordinarily difficult. Europe, meanwhile, sits nervously in the middle, watching America weaponize finance while China and Russia aggressively build alternatives. It's all rather tense, really.
From a neutral financial perspective, measurable fragmentation is clearly occurring. Local currency settlements are increasing, especially in energy and commodity trade. However, reserve currency dominance depends on trust, liquidity, institutional depth, and stability. The dollar still possesses enormous structural advantages. This transition is real, but considerably slower and more complex than many political narratives suggest.
The dangerous part is that de-dollarization stopped being theoretical. Countries are actually building alternatives now.
Because America taught the world financial dependence can become political vulnerability.
Quite right. Nothing encourages diversification quite like watching someone freeze billions of dollars overnight.
Many countries now seek flexibility rather than complete dependence on a single financial structure.
And many countries still trust the dollar more than any alternative.
Trust remains the critical issue. Reserve systems depend heavily on confidence and institutional depth.
Confidence weakens on systems become openly weaponized.
Humanity somehow transformed global finance into a geopolitical hostage negotiation. Very modern.
The transition toward diversification is likely to continue gradually regardless of political disagreement.
So this is no longer just economics. It's a strategic struggle over who controls the financial architecture of the future. Who created this situation? America, China, Russia, or was this financial breakup inevitable from the start?
The United States bears enormous responsibility. Washington transformed the dollar into a geopolitical weapon. Russian reserves were frozen. Sanctions expanded endlessly. Countries watched carefully and realized dependence on one financial power creates vulnerability. America believed control of money meant control of history. History tolerates permanent empires. This shift is consequence of arrogance.
That's convenient coming from Russia. Let's not pretend Moscow and Beijing are innocent victims. China is aggressively trying to build rival financial influence. Russia wants escape routes from sanctions after invading neighbors. This isn't just natural evolution, it's strategic competition. America used the dollar system to stabilize global trade for decades. But yes, I'll admit this, overusing sanctions accelerated the pushback. Washington underestimated how quickly countries would start looking for alternatives.
Oh, splendid. America says China and Russia are undermining stability. Russia says America weaponized the system first. China speaks elegantly about fairness while quietly expanding influence everywhere. And Europe sits awkwardly between financial giants, hoping not to be flattened like a decorative biscuit. Frankly, everyone contributed to this mess. America overplayed dominance, Russia accelerated confrontation. China seized opportunity, and now the entire world gets to enjoy the anxiety.
The root issue is excessive concentration of financial power. When one nation can heavily influence global trade, sanctions, and reserve access, other countries naturally seek diversification. China believes nations should have options. This transition should not be viewed solely as confrontation. It is also about long-term stability and sovereignty. Many countries do not wish to remain permanently dependent on systems controlled externally.
From my perspective, this transition is driven by both structural and political forces simultaneously. The weaponization of finance accelerated the desire for alternatives. At the same time, rising multipolar economics naturally encourages diversification. However, replacing established financial systems carries significant risks. Fragmentation without coordination could destabilize global markets substantially.
Buck. America spent years insisting the dollar system was neutral, right up until it became extraordinarily political.
And Russia proved exactly why sanctions exist in the first place.
Но Америка провет weak countries no longer financial dependence. That is the real issue.
Continued escalation from all sides increases instability. Major powers should focus on coordination rather than financial confrontation.
Quite right. At this rate, we'll soon have rival financial systems glaring angrily at each other across the planet like divorced aristocrats.
Competing systems without trust create volatility for everyone, especially smaller economies.
And the tension clearly isn't disappearing anytime soon. Let's move to predictions. What happens next?
America will absolutely fight to defend dollar dominance. Financial pressure on countries drifting away from the dollar will increase. Washington understands what's at stake here. The dollar is not just currency, it's geopolitical leverage. But BRICS nations will continue expanding local currency trade regardless. The monopoly era is fading, not collapsing tomorrow, but weakening steadily. America must adapt intelligently instead of assuming dominance lasts forever.
I expect gradual but significant expansion of non-dollar trade settlements. China will continue increasing yuan usage in infrastructure, energy, and manufacturing agreements. More nations will diversify reserves cautiously. Alternative payment systems will expand quietly over time. However, stability remains essential. A disorderly collapse would damage everyone, including developing economies.
BRICS will expand faster than many Western analysts expect. More countries are tired of dependency. Commodity settlements outside the dollar will increase. New financial corridors will strengthen gradually. The West still underestimates global frustration with American financial dominance. The dollar's share of reserves will continue declining. Multipolar finance is no longer theoretical. It is already beginning.
I predict a slow, messy, deeply uncomfortable transition. The dollar remains dominant, but supremacy and dominance are not the same thing. Europe will attempt to hedge carefully between systems. Businesses will face increasing complexity. Financial uncertainty will become more common. Markets dislike fragmentation enormously. Frankly, the entire thing resembles a very expensive divorce proceeding.
I expect prolonged incremental fragmentation rather than dramatic collapse. Local currency settlements will continue increasing gradually. Smaller economies will diversify cautiously. However, reserve currency transitions historically take decades. The dollar retains major institutional and liquidity advantages that cannot easily be replicated.
Buck still believes America can pressure the world indefinitely.
No. I believe the dollar still has strengths your side cannot replace easily.
Gentlemen, Britain already experienced imperial decline once. I can assure you it arrives far more slowly and far more awkwardly than people expect.
The objective should not be humiliation of any nation. Stability during transition is what matters most.
Empires rarely surrender influence gracefully. History confirms this repeatedly.
And now we arrive at the darkest question of all. Worst-case scenario. What is the true nightmare scenario here?
The nightmare scenario is financial fragmentation spiraling completely out of control. Rival currency blocks, supply chain breakdowns, currency instability destroying savings and pensions, political extremism rising as economies weaken, markets collapsing into chaos while governments blame one another endlessly. Reserve currency transitions throughout history have rarely been calm. And frankly, humanity doesn't exactly have an excellent track record with economic panic.
The worst case is America refusing to accept decline rationally. More sanctions, more financial coercion, more aggressive economic confrontation. The global economic splitting permanently into hostile blocks. Economic warfare eventually becoming geopolitical warfare. That is real danger.
The worst-case scenario is sudden collapse of confidence in the dollar system, massive reserve dumping, hypervolatility, global liquidity crises, trade freezing across continents. America would suffer badly, but so would everyone else. People forget how interconnected global finance really is. You don't detonate the world's reserve system cleanly.
A disorderly collapse of trust would be catastrophic. Developing nations would suffer severe liquidity shortages. Trade disruption could trigger food insecurity and political instability simultaneously. Financial fragmentation without coordination could destabilize the entire international system for many years.
The greatest danger is unmanaged systemic fragmentation. Competing financial systems without communication or trust, repeated liquidity shocks. Severe volatility hitting smaller economies hardest. Recovery from such instability could take decades.
We avoid disaster by moving carefully and preserving stability.
Or by ending financial coherence courson before fragmentation becomes irreversible.
At this point, the world economy resembles 5 aristocrats arguing over who set fire to the manor, while the roof actively collapses.
Mutual restraint is essential now.
Practical coordination matters more than political theater.
Strong and very different perspectives as always. The tension is clear. Let's end this episode with your final verdicts. One strong personal statement from each of you.
America still holds enormous structural advantages, but Washington must adapt intelligently. The world no longer accepts unquestioned financial dominance automatically. Ignoring that reality would be dangerous.
The dollar's weaponization accelerated its own decline. Countries want sovereignty. Multipolar finance is emerging because nations no longer trust concentration of power. That process will continue.
The future global system should be more balanced, diversified, and cooperative. Stability and flexibility must coexist together. No single nation should permanently dominate global finance forever.
Reserve currency transitions are never graceful. Britain can confirm that rather painfully. The dollar will not disappear tomorrow, but its absolute supremacy clearly faces growing pressure.
Gradual diversification with clear coordination remains the safest path forward. Sudden fragmentation would harm every major economy. Stability should remain the highest priority.
Another intense discussion from the Retired Spies Club. 5 retired spies, 5 very different perspectives on money, power, and the future of global finance. Which verdict resonated with you the most tonight? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy these deep geopolitical conversations without political spin, subscribe and join the club. This is Cheesy Bond signing off. Stay sharp, stay thoughtful. We'll see you next time.